and I never left since. So today I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what the program involves, some of the logistics around timings and the modules you would take during the program. And I'm going to try and run through my presentation as quickly as possible to leave lots of time for your questions and give you an opportunity to ask anything that's not clear or that you're wondering about the course. Okay. So a little bit of general kind of marketing blurb first, I guess. Why DCU Business School? So DCU Business School is accredited by two worldwide organizations, AACSB and AMBA, and that puts us in the top 5% of business schools across the world. DCU as a whole, and in particular DCU Business School, is recognized nationally and internationally as being an industry facing university, so being very concerned with teaching in a way that's applied to industry and that can be useful in industry immediately. And so we have very strong industry connections across Ireland and the UK. We're also recognised internationally for excellence in our teaching, and in particular that applied and industry focused approach. Studying psychology in a business school is a kind of an interesting thing, and really the big advantage of doing this is trying to find that balance between an understanding of psychology and the psychological skills that come with that and the business context, which is really critical for anybody hoping to be an organisational psychologist or an expert in organisation. And so it's really that balance between developing that psychological and deeper understanding of people at work, and also developing an ability to speak business language and to sell what it is that you'd like to do in your organizations to the C-suite. DCU's master's program is the longest running program in organizational psychology in Ireland. It's accredited by the PSI, the Psychological Society of Ireland, and the CIPD, which is the leading HR body in Ireland. And really, we have an incredible depth of expertise in our faculty. We have the largest group of organisational psychologists in any faculty in Ireland. And all of those faculty delivering on the programme are research active in their fields. So they're actively contributing to building knowledge about people at work, about their specific expertise. And they're bringing that into the classroom as they're teaching. And so DCU is the best place in Ireland to study organisational psychology at the moment. One of the most important things that I think sets our programme apart is our focus on building that interactive classroom experience and a collaborative learning community. One of the biggest resources and assets of the programme is the experience of the people who are students on the programme, post-experience masters. So over the last 5 or 6 cohorts, the average work experience of people joining the program has been somewhere between 13 and 14 years. So we very rarely offer places to people who are recent graduates or people who don't work in an area that is in some way related to what's happening. We are aimed at people who are able to use and apply what they're learning in college as they go along. And that is an incredibly important part of building that interactive classroom experience. So we aim to build a community where we can debate some of the topics, where we can say, here's the latest theory of motivation or the latest theory of organizational strategy, and let's talk about how that might work in your organization. Or can you tell us times when that's worked really well, or times when it might have caused a little bit of a challenge, and let's debate some of that and see how we can use this theory and this knowledge in a bit more of a practical kind of way. And in some cases, challenge that theory and knowledge and think about how it might need to be developed further. The kind of things that we study in the course are things like motivation, relationships, organizational change and leadership. And all of these things are important, I think, to unlocking human potential at work and giving organizations that kind of competitive advantage. But as you move through the program, we also try and take greater and greater account of context kind of challenges. So thinking about how you can enable employees to deliver great results with fewer resources, or how does that motivation theory work in situations where organizations are more constrained. And maybe now is a time where that's even more relevant than it has been over the last few years. So if theories of motivation or theories of organizational relationships assume, for instance, some sort of face-to-face contact, then how can organizations adapt that and try and maintain positive relationships or maintain levels of motivation when people are based at home and working from home for long periods of time? Other kinds of context-related things that we might take into account are thinking about how you can maximize performance and well-being despite the fact that boundaries between work and life are increasingly blurred, and particularly so now that we're all working from our houses. And also thinking about the future of work. So as more algorithms and technology and AI start to make decisions for us in organizations, how do people interact with that kind of technology? How do we make decisions, for instance, about when to trust a recommendation that comes from an algorithm and when we should trust our gut instinct, or thinking about changing demographics at work. So you'll all have heard lots about having an aging workforce, and how does that work as we start to have more generations of people in the workforce together. Our aim in the Masters in Work and Organisational Psychology is to equip graduates with the competencies to address these challenges. So to give them the knowledge around things like motivation and leadership and workplace relationships and organisational change, but also to use the programme to help you apply that to your work on an ongoing basis during the programme, and then to give you also the skills so that you can build that knowledge and continue to build on that knowledge after you leave us as well. I have a couple of things then that I just wanted to cover off because these are frequently asked questions. So this is something that I get asked a lot. What's the difference between the organizational psychology track and the organizational behavior track? So there's no difference at all in terms of the course. Whether you come in as an organizational psychology student or an organizational behavior student is based on what you did before you applied for the program. So to join the organizational psychology track, you have to have an undergraduate or equivalent in psychology. And that's to do with our accreditations. So the people who come into the organizational psychology track can go on afterwards to work with the Psychological Society of Ireland to become a chartered work and organizational psychologist. And the people who join the OB track can't, because one of the requirements of the Psychological Society of Ireland is that anybody who becomes a registered or chartered psychologist has to have that undergraduate level degree in psychology. So for our purposes, there's no difference in the course. The OB and Org Psych students are all in one class. The teams are mixed. So on the teams, we make sure that there's some people who have that background in psychology and some people who don't. And what we've found over the years is that there's no difference in terms of performance across the two groups. And actually our OB graduates are going on to do many of the same jobs in many of the same organizations. And so we haven't seen a difference in terms of career prospects either, except that as an OB graduate, you can't work with the PSI to become a chartered or registered psychologist. So that's kind of one of the things that a lot of people often have a question about. The logistics then, some of the kind of more practical aspects or information about the course. So we alternate our intakes between Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So the 2020 intake will be on a Tuesday afternoon from 3 until 8:15 p.m. We're very protective over keeping it that one afternoon a week because it is designed to attract people who are working full-time. We would have the occasional student who's working part-time, but about 90-something% of students on the program would have full-time jobs alongside this. So we try to keep all of our contact hours within that one period every week. And if you think about how an academic semester works, what you're actually talking about is having 11 Tuesdays before Christmas, so somewhere between the end of September and Christmas, having 11 Tuesday afternoons, and then after Christmas having another 11 Tuesday afternoons. So it's spread over a 12-week semester, but there's 1 week break in the middle where you don't have contact time. So that's what you're talking about in terms of time away from work, and it is very much designed for people working full-time. The fees for the program are up to €13,000 for the 2 years. It's all continuous assessment. We don't have any formal exams. And again, that's very much part of the ethos of our program, is that we're trying to build a collaborative and applied learning environment. So this is not material that we would like you to learn off by heart and to be able to regurgitate in some sort of exam. What we would like to do is to help you gain that kind of knowledge and apply it as you're moving along. So we're very much focused on continuous assessment. We do have some very small unseen case studies or quizzes, and that's part of our CIPD accreditation, but they're typically worth about 10% of one module. Each year we have 10% of one module. That's an unseen case study or quiz. We have group assignments built in as part of the program, and again, this is a very important part of building that collaborative learning environment. We do our best in forming those teams to make sure that we have as much diversity as possible in terms of the backgrounds that people have in education, but also the backgrounds that they have in industry. And I think for me as an alumni of the program, one of the biggest things that I learned when I did the program in 2007 was that not every organization behaved in the same way as the organizations that I had experience in. So when I joined the program, I had 7 years work experience, and I had only ever really worked in professional services or financial services firms. And being on a team then with, so I had somebody then who had been working for a large public service organization, somebody working for a family business, and just chatting to them about how different things were in the different organizational contexts was a really big learning experience for me. And so those group assignments are an important part of the program. We tend to limit them though to 1 per semester. And how much they are worth is capped at 30% of a particular module. So it only works out as at just over 10% or almost 11% of your overall grade for the master's program. So while they're an important learning experience, we are keen also to make sure that your final grade in the master's reflects your performance on the master's and the knowledge that you've gained. Also, I think another reason behind limiting them to 1 per semester is they do take that little bit of extra coordination. So arranging some sort of meetups, or whether that's virtual or it's in person, or staying after class to chat about what your strategy is for completing assignments. So, and we make sure that we keep them 1 per semester just so that you're not overloaded with that. The course also involves an independent piece of research, and this is your master's dissertation, and that's what makes it an MSc program. And this research dissertation is on any topic of your choosing, as long as it's related to organisational psychology and behaviour. And we work with you through the 2 years of the program to help you develop a research question that has practical and academic importance, and that's of interest to you or relevant to your organisation in some way. And once you have developed that question, then to collect data, so either, for instance, collecting surveys or by doing interviews with different people, so that you can answer that research question. And that's done under the supervision of a member of staff. So you'll be allocated a supervisor at the end of your first year. In terms of actual modules then, so we have split the course obviously into 2 years, and then within each of those years you've got 2 semesters. The emphasis in the first year is in giving you a foundation in the kind of knowledge in organisational psychology that you need to then build on in year 2, which is an emphasis more on application and skills work. So in semester 1 you do a foundational organisational psychology module, all of those kinds of topics like motivation and well-being, workplace relationships, work-life balance, all of those kinds of things involved in that, and giving you that grounding in the theory of organisational psychology. You also do a strategy module, which is a very hands-on kind of a module that involves working on a simulation of running an organisation, and that's a team project, as well as a case where you're analysing the strategy in your own organisation and thinking about how that can be improved upon. In semester 2 then you start research methodology, so starting to think about your master's dissertation. And research methods very much picks up from your organisational psychology module, in that in organisational psychology you'll have started to think about what are the bits of organisational psychology that are either most relevant to my organisation or most of interest to me personally. And in research methods then we help you kind of pick up those interests and turn them into a research question and a research interest. You also have a module that semester on organisational leadership and change, covering some of the key leadership styles and approaches, and also thinking about how leaders and organizations can manage ongoing change within their organizations. In second year then, as I said, there's more of an emphasis on application and skills, so taking some of that content that we cover in first year and starting to apply it to more specific organizational tasks. So in the first semester you have a selection and assessment module, which is all about how do I analyze a job to try and find the right person for it? How would we set up assessment centers or interviews or promotion schemes? And focusing not necessarily, I guess, on the HR and logistics of those things, but more on the psychological side of it. So thinking about, like, if I'm running an interview or an assessment process, what are the kind of biases that inform decision making? Or if I'm trying to integrate artificial intelligence, for instance, into some sort of selection or a CV screening process, what do I need to be aware of in terms of how I interact with that technology and in terms of how I interpret any decisions that it makes? And we have a module then on organizational learning and development, which takes a little bit more of a strategy focus on thinking about how organizations need to think about developing people. There's also some theory in there about how people learn, some of the psychology behind how people learn, and how we can facilitate that in a workplace environment. You take a talent management module, which again is a slightly more strategic module, thinking about succession planning, and how to reward and differentiate between different types of performers in your organization. The second semester of year two, we have a practicing organizational psychology module, which is a series of workshops that differ basically depending on what's happening in the context of the world at the time. So for instance, in the last economic downturn, we would have had workshops in there on unemployment and underemployment. Last year, there was a big focus on the future of work and thinking about human-computer interaction, changing demographics in the workplace. We also had a workshop in there on conflict management, on the ethics of being a psychologist, organizational behavior expert in an organization. And so we adapt those skills modules basically depending on the makeup of the class and also what's happening in the external environment. You do a coaching and mentoring module, which is a very applied module, through which you'll actually be engaging in coaching and keeping coaching logs and reflecting on that experience. And we also have a psychometrics and analytics module. The psychometrics part of which is doing an accreditation with the British Psychological Society in what's called level A, or test user ability psychometrics. And those are psychometrics that are designed to assess different types of ability in the workplace. So that's a built-in part of the program, and that psychometrics class is the only part of the program that doesn't happen in our regular contact hours on a Tuesday. So that psychometrics class is typically a 2-day program, and because it's delivered by that British Psychological Society, and we give you a number of months notice of when that happens, but it's typically on a Friday, Saturday in the first semester of second year. The data analytics portion of it then is designed to pick up on your research methods training from year one and to support you in the analysis of your data as you start collecting that information for your dissertation. I often get a lot of inquiries from people about the career impact of the program and what people do afterwards. This is a list of just some of the employers of our graduates. What I will say is that career-wise, we see a lot of diversity. So we would often, for instance, see a lot of people joining our organisational behaviour track who have got to a very senior point in their careers and are using this now to gain expertise outside of what their original expertise was in. So maybe they got to be the director of engineering, for instance, or we have a director of manufacturing in a pharma company on our year one group at the moment. Or we had a director of technology in Coca-Cola. So those sorts of roles where they've got to a senior management level and now have decided actually they need to understand more about people and managing people and leading people. And then on the other side of that coin, I guess we would have usually about a third of the class in HR related kind of roles. So not just HR, but also including in that kind of management consultancy or coaching and consultancy, those sorts of roles. And then we would have a smaller number of people who are more junior in their careers. So as I said, the average work experience of somebody joining the program has been somewhere around 14 years over the last 5 cohorts, but we would have a smaller number of people down who are more junior. So in terms of career impact, it's pretty diverse, as you can imagine, depending on where you started originally. Over the last 5 cohorts, about 80% of people have changed career or been promoted either during or in the first year after graduation. But as I will teach you, and if you join us when we do research methods, we'll talk about how correlation is not equal to causation. So we cannot claim that the program causes 80% of people to change their careers or get promoted, just that correlation is there. And obviously we would also attract people who are looking to make a change. So I'd imagine that that's some of that relationship as well. One thing that we are incredibly proud of is that about 75 to 80% of our applications come from people who have either been recommended to the program by a past graduate or by an employer who had worked with a past graduate. And I think that's really testament to the reputation that we've built up in industry, and that's something that we're incredibly proud of, as I say. I was hoping to use the rest of this session to answer your questions. I know if you're joining today that there are probably lots of things that you're wondering about the program, and I was hoping to use this time now to address some of those